Hello all, and welcome to the second of two lectures on our topic for today, which is sexuality. I've titled this lecture, Sex in the City, Pompeii. I want to start this lecture with a content warning. A lot of the images we will be seeing today are very graphic. The language, especially in the graffiti, is obscene, and there is one brief mention of sexual assault. When compared to Rome, the city of Pompeii seems to be filled with erotic imagery. According to Barry in her textbook, The Complete Pompeii, one of the features of Pompeii that often surprises visitors is the frequency of erotic images. Erotic art, in the form of wall paintings, graffiti, and artifacts, is found all over the town, in private houses, public buildings, and on the street facades. Unlike today, there was no attempt to hide away explicit scenes at Pompeii. She continues, Pompeii can justifiably be described as the most famous archaeological site in the world. The size of the town often causes great surprise to new visitors and means that those returning on subsequent visits inevitably see something new each time they pass through the town's gates. I've been to Pompeii twice and I've still never seen it all. Because of its size and the great preservation of the site, it is a great means of examining what daily life might have been like for normal Romans, as we've talked about already. That is, the Romans who were not the upper class educated males who were writing literature. And what you find is a lot of sexually explicit materials, which speaks to the centrality of sexuality in Roman culture. First, I'm going to begin with wall paintings and images that were found around the town in Pompeii. Some of these were on the street and easy to see, while others were found inside homes. First up is an image of Leda and the Swan, a myth in which the god Zeus transforms himself into a swan in order to sleep with Leda, the mother of Helen. I don't actually know much about this painting, but based on evidence unearthed last year, another painting of Leda and the Swan found in a bedroom, I suggest that the one on the left might also have been found in a bedroom. This find was sensationalized in the news, and unfortunately, reporters chose to represent it as erotic rather than report the scene as sexual assault as it is. If you're interested, I have co-authored an article on misrepresentations of this wall painting in the media that I can send you. This fresco was found in the house of Caecilius Jucundus in Pompeii and is now housed in the National Museum of Naples, in the secret cabinet I mentioned in my Topic A lecture. As far as I can tell, not much has been written about it, so we don't really know the context in which it was found. It's just one of my favorite frescoes, and I could not leave it out of this talk. Though I will note that the owner of the house, Caecilius Jucundus, was the inspiration for the family in the Cambridge Latin course Latin textbook. On this slide, you can see a statue found on Pompeii, but in Herculaneum. Yes, it is the god Pan having sex with a goat, and yes, it was used to decorate someone's home. Roberts, in his book Life and Death in Pompeii and Herculaneum, states that Pan had always been an ambivalent god. He was, after all, half man and half goat, as his shaggy legs, cloven hooves, and horns confirmed. He was, as goats were always believed to be, endowed with endless sexual energy. Yet people mostly linked Pan to the world of men as a highly capricious companion for country people. Here, his goat side is dominant and he wants another goat. Pan is penetrating the goat, but the whole composition is remarkably calm. This is no surprise attack. In fact, Pan and his love have settled into a position of relative comfort. It might well have been seen by the Romans as humorous, even a tender coupling. Unsurprisingly, this was not the reaction in the middle and of the 18th century when it was found. The sculpture was not put on public view, unlike other treasures from Herculaneum displayed in the King of Naples collections, though the piece could be viewed with the king's permission. The statue still shocks modern audiences. In 2013, when it was on display at the British Museum, it was accompanied by a warning sign. This is one of the many street penises, or phallus paving stones, that can be found all around Pompeii. Phalluses like this were found on paving stones, like this one, or wall reliefs, like in the next slide. Tour guides often tell visitors that the stone penises of Pompeii are one of the earliest known forms of advertising. According to their stories, the phalluses serve as arrows, and if you follow the arrows, you'll wind up at one of the city's many brothels. But though tourists eager to learn about the city's seedy history gobble up this legend and spread it around the internet, that version of the penis's history is most likely false. According to many scholars, the phalluses were symbols, not advertisements for sex. Some theories maintain that the penises were actually good luck signs or symbols meant to ward off the evil eye, which is why they're often found outside homes and not just in brothels or outside brothels. Renowned classicist Mary Beard proposes that they simply reflect a masculine society with a penchant for erotic art. One of the most famous erotic images from Pompeii is that of Priapus from the House of the Vetii in Reggio 6, which we saw briefly in our first sexuality lecture. He was a Roman god who offered protection to gardens by scaring off anyone with his large erect phallus. Because of his very large penis, he also became a symbol of fertility. Barry, in her textbook, states about this image that Priapus weighs his penis against a bag of coins over a basket overflowing with fruits. This wall painting from the entrance of the House of the Vetii would have been considered a symbol of good luck and prosperity. Images of Priapus are found all over Pompeii. These were not intended as erotic symbols, but as charms to ward off the evil eye and ensure prosperity. It is for this reason that this painting is found in the entryway. It is one way to ensure good luck to the inhabitants of the house. The next two images are also from the House of the Vetii in Pompeii. These are very erotic images depicting a sexual act. This image shows an encounter between a man and a woman, with the man taking the dominant role. Yet the position of the female's leg suggests that she is also controlling in this situation. This is another fresco found in the House of the Vetii. This one differs drastically from the other one in that the woman is clearly taking the dominant role in the sexual situation. She is on top and controlling the man with a hand placed on his head. Both this image and the previous one were found not in the entryway, but in a special room known as the Venarium. The Venarium, named after the god Venus, was an element of ancient Roman private apartments found particularly in Pompeii. It was originally interpreted as a specialized apartment or room dedicated to sexual activities. Besides these images, we also have a lot, and I repeat, a lot, of erotic graffiti from Pompeii. As we've talked about before, Pompeii is just covered with graffiti. The entire fourth volume of the Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum is devoted to writing found on the walls of Pompeii, and the original volume contains over 10,000 entry, with many more having been added in supplemental volumes over the years. I know that we've looked at a lot of graffiti before, and we've read some of these before, but I want to note here that, while these are sometimes funny and obscene, we're looking at them today as evidence of non-elite voices, not gratuitous titillation. I will start with graffiti about men, as the majority of sexual graffiti we have are about men and by men. As you'll see in the upcoming graffiti, the graffiti by and about men reflect the bisexual nature of Roman sexuality. This shows that the conventions we have for upper class men of literature also trickled down to the lower classes. First one on your page is, "Here I butt fuck dear Rufus. Girl sad, bi, arrogant cunt." In this graffito, we have a man boasting about his sexual exploits with a man and telling the women in his life to be sad because he is now exclusively into men. Probably because women are arrogant, as the last line suggests. The second one reads, "Better to be sucked by friends than to give a blowjob to enemies." This graffito shows the specific boundaries set for Roman male sexuality. A man should be an impenetrable penetrator. Thus, it is better for a man to be sucked by friends, because he is still penetrating, than to give a blowjob to his enemies, which would show his submissive and feminine nature. The third one reads, Narcissus was horny here, Narcissus was horny here." This one is just a man writing about his need for sex on a random wall. Fun fact though, the Latin word for horny is actually thirsty, so we've come full circle. All three of the graffiti on this page were found in the brothel in region 7 of Pompeii. We'll talk more about the brothel later. The first one reads, "Phoebus the performer has had great sex here." This graffito seems to be just a man rejoicing after a sexual exploit. It was probably a compliment and a sort of advertisement for the women of the brothel for a graffiti such as this to be written. Graffito 2, which reads, "Scordo Portoconus has had good sex here with whichever man he wanted," and number 3, which reads, "Placidus had sex here with every man he wanted," show that yet again men could have sex with other men. The fact that it was found in the brothel shows that even though homosexual desire was fine, it was only okay to enact it with non-citizen with a non-citizen, such as a male prostitute who would have been available at the brothel. The first one on this screen reads, "Here with my mistress I have, here with my mistress, with her buttocks wide open, I have done the job." But to write verses like that would be disgraceful. This graffito was written by an educated man since it is in meter. As we saw with Catullus, writing obscene verses was not necessarily disgraceful, so it's a little odd that this writer would be ashamed to write about this. The second one read, "No man is agreeable who hasn't loved a woman when he was a young boy." This graffito was found, this graffito shows the importance that sexual activity had in Roman society, and you'll note it was found in the Basilica. This graffito reads, "If someone tells me get up and fuck, if there's a good reason, get up. If not, go on drinking. You, my girl, have bought for yourself." And then we don't know what it says after that. This graffito was found in a house, showing exactly how widespread around the city erotic graffiti were. And this is the one that we have seen before. Now that you've gone bankrupt 8 times, it remains for you to do so 16 times. You worked as a cook, a clayman, a pickler, and a baker. You were a farmer, and you worked as a maker of small bronzes. You were a retailer, and now you work as a jugman. But if you've gone down on a girl, you've had it all. This is one of my favorite graffiti, mostly because it goes against all the stuff we've seen about oral sex being a bad thing. While cunnilingus would still mean that the man was the penetrator, oral sex was seen as a dirty thing. And yet, this author is celebrating cunnilingus. Now I'm going to focus more closely on graffiti both about women and by women, as women are definitely an underrepresented group in the Roman literary corpus. The majority of graffiti we have by or about women are obscene, due both to where we found them, brothels, and who they're written about and or by, prostitutes. Graffiti with names, especially those attributed to prostitutes, show not only self-promotion, but a desire to be remembered in some way. While the elite men had their poetry, everyone else had the walls of their hometown. All of these I have designated as written about women, but there's a slight possibility that some were written by the women themselves. I want to point out that 10 of the 17 women mentioned by name in these selections are prostitutes. We have other graffiti with their names advertising their prices and services. So first the first one reads, "Apulia luce clitoris." The second one reads, "Beware of wives." And the third one reads, "Achidia cocksucker." The ones about Apula and Achidia are probably advertisements, since they were just on our previous screen as prostitutes. The first one on your screen here reads, "Palmyra, who makes men horny." And the second one reads, "Trebonius to UK, butt shaking wise," and then another obscene adverb that we can't actually translate. As with graffiti about horny men, the participle here used to mean horny is thirsty. The second graffito shows the inventiveness of Romans when it came to talking about sexual activity. This one reads, "Restitutus says, 'Restituta, take off your tunic, please, shameful Harry.'" Restituta is also a prostitute. Restitutus is probably leaving a note for his favorite prostitute. Or Restitutus is the owner of a brothel advertising for his slave, Restituta. This would make the most sense due to the fact that their names are so similar. This one reads, "Medusae fututrix," or "Medusa a fuctrix." The Latin obscene word fututrix is sometimes taken to refer to the active partner in sex between women, but is most likely to have a passive sense. When referring to this word, people often cite the actual Latin sexual vocabulary, which defines fututrix as "she who is fucked." However, the trix ending has an active meaning. It is a female ending for someone enacting the action of a verb. Think of Bellatrix Lestrange from Harry Potter. She's the one who wages war. So now I'm going to take a little bit of time here for a very relevant aside about female sexual agency. As we've learned, the Romans believed that women should be the passive recipients of male sexual action. And yet the existence of words such as fututrix suggests that women play an active role in sex. Deborah Cameron and Sarah Levin Richardson, in their recent chapter titled "Lusty Ladies in the Roman Imaginary," which was assigned reading for today, examined 3 words that suggest that some women in Roman culture were conceptualized as sexual agents despite being penetrated, fututrix and philotrix, while others were conceptualized as agents and penetrators. Tribos. A phalloctrix was a woman who performs fellatio. The word phalloctrix appears only in graffiti, as we've already seen. As they point out, performers of fellatio were doubly stigmatized. Not only was a performer's mouth penetrated by the act, but the act was also thought to be particularly reprehensible for the pollution it caused by oral contact with the genitals. They conclude that, regardless of the original intentions of whoever wrote these statements, advertising the sexual acts of these women, expressing admiration for or pride in their sexual acts, or disparaging the women by calling disparaging the women by calling attention to her penetrated and polluted status, the ancient noun phalloctrix highlights their sexual agency. A tribos is literally a woman who rubs, but is usually used generally to refer to women who penetrate. The precise acts of tribades are not described anywhere in literature, though because they are thought of to have male parts, it probably involves penetration. We see no graffiti with this term, so we'll move quickly past it. The final and most interesting, in my opinion, is the tomb for fututrix or fuctress. Kamen and Levin Richardson state that fututrix is a rare epithet that scholars have interpreted in two ways. The first way is to equate it with tribos. By this interpretation, for a woman to be active in fututio, she must penetrate someone. The other approach is to gloss fututrix as ea qui futuitur, she who is fucked. The supposition in this case seems to be that a woman cannot be the active partner in futuito. Both of these interpretations assume that women cannot be active sexually while still being penetrated. This is why Kamen and Levin Richardson suggest that fututrix should be she who fucks. They suggest that it is used to imply desire, agency, and movement, especially since proper wives, according to Lucretius, hardly move their bodies during sex, since doing so would make it harder for them to conceive. Prostitutes, on the other hand, gyrate in all sorts of ways, both because they don't want to conceive and also because they know that doing so arouses their clients. Therefore, the existence of words such as fututrix shows that Romans had a clear conceptualization of some women as active in sexual encounters. We've seen this one before as well. Severa, you blow. The repeated S sound is meant to imitate the sound of a blowjob. Severa does not appear elsewhere as a prostitute, so we don't actually know her status. This one reads, Secundus sends greetings to his prima, wherever she, the mistress, may be. I ask you, madam, to love me. This might be a love letter to his girlfriend, but prima is also found elsewhere as the name of a prostitute, so it could be a love letter to a favorite prostitute. Notice the similarities here between the poetry of Catullus and Propertius, who are submissive to their mistresses, just like Secundus seems to be submissive to prima. This one just reads, Matrina with a nice ass. Matrina is never listed as a prostitute either. This one says the name Fortunata and then has the image of a person giving a blowjob. So it is implied that it says that it is meant to say Fortunata sucks it. There seem to have been many Fortunatas who were prostitutes. This is possibly an advertisement, especially with the visual representation. Now let's look at some graffiti written by women. Graffiti by women are a tiny minority, and estimated at 4% of the whole corpus by certain scholars. But really, this small amount of graffiti is our best evidence for the lives of lower class women. So first I will read all of these. So the first one reads, Prima sends many greetings to Secundus. The second one reads, Chloe gives greetings to Eutychia. You don't care about me, Eutychia, firmly hoping that you may love Publius Rufus. The third one reads, your mistress, Valens, I wish you were my mistress, Valens, we pray for help. The fourth one reads, I do not want to sell my man, whatever the price. The fifth one reads, I have been fucked here. And the sixth one reads, I, Felicula, have fucked here. A lot of these are just notes to friends. The last two were written by the women of the brothel, Felicula and someone else. This one, which reads, Solemnis, you fuck well, was written by a prostitute about a client. Here we have a graffito that reached out. Laculus greets Priscillus kindly. Epapha wrote this, and Elia finished it, both being horny. Yet again, the word for horny is thirsty. Although this is one of the rare graffiti we have in two hands. One person started it, and another one finished it. This one reads, I am yours for one ass, which was a bronze coin. This is definitely a woman advertising self, which leads me to think that some of these about women graffiti could be self-advertisements, like Matrina with a nice ass and Medusa a fuctress. This one reads, if only you could feel the fire of my love, driver, you would hasten more to see Venus. I am in love with a handsome boy. Please, spur on the horses, let's go. You've drunk, let's go, take the reins and lash. Take me to Pompeii, where my sweet love is, you're mine. Only two scholars think this is a woman writing based on the fact that the writer is in love with a handsome boy. Because of the bisexuality of Roman men, it is possible that it was written by a man. This is just the image for the next graffito. We've seen this one already, but I'm going to read it again. It says, oh, if only I could hold my little arms around your neck and give kisses to your tender lips. Come on, little darling, consign your joys to the winds. Believe me, frivolous is the nature of men. Often when I am waking in the middle of the night, quite lost, I ponder over this. Many men whom fortune has raised on high, she suddenly drops, and brings them down and presses them. So does Venus. As she has suddenly united the bodies of lovers, the first light of day divides them, and you will separate their love. Unlike the last one, this one is definitely written by a woman. Complexa in the first line is a feminine participle describing the speaker. Scholars suggest that this is a lonely woman talking mostly to herself and then addressing Venus, but others have suggested it could be a woman writing to another woman, especially due to the line, frivolous is the nature of men. The two erotic poems, this one and the one from the previous slide, show that the women of Pompeii were trying, just like the Latin elegists and the male Latin poets we read, to express their feelings in a familiar way. For the last part of my lecture, I'm going to talk about the Lupanar, or the main brothel of Pompeii. Sarah Levin Richardson, who co-authored the chapter on Fututrix I mentioned before, published a year ago a book on this brothel titled The Brothel of Pompeii, Sex, Class, and Gender on the Margins of Roman Society. In this book, she points out that the purpose-built brothel is one of the most visited, if not the most visited site in Pompeii. Despite the fact that Levin Richardson's title says that women of this brothel were on the margins of society, the brothel itself is located very near the heart of the city, just a few blocks away from the Forum, where most of the daily activity would take place. It is called purpose-built because it was built to be a brothel, unlike a lot of places which started with some other purpose and were turned into a brothel, or rooms for prostitutes at bars and inns. Prostitution was legal in Rome, and Roman men would patronize both male and usually young male prostitutes, many of whom were probably enslaved individuals. Prostitutes had to register as professionals with the authorities and were taxed. In order to differentiate themselves from proper Roman women, prostitutes wore a man's toga, a form of cross-dressing that may mark her degraded condition as a public woman. Prostitution was common in the urban landscape, from tombs to bars, taverns, inns, civic centers, etc. Literary and archaeological evidence suggests that sex could be bought nearly anywhere. And yet, as Levin Richardson states, identifying Roman brothels in the archaeological record has never been an exact science. Even now, the debate continues about how we should define an ancient Roman brothel, how we can identify those structures among the excavated ruins, and whether we should even focus on brothels at all, given the diversity of places where prostitution took place in the Roman world. Wallace Hadrill came up with 3 criteria as markers of a structure where sex was sold, the first being a masonry bed in a small room, the second, sexually explicit frescoes, And third, a cluster of sexually explicit graffiti. McGinn added that for a building to qualify as a brothel, the major source of income should be from prostitution, which would exclude suites at the back of bars, and that a brothel should be able to host more than one prostitute at a time, excluding single rooms. These criteria described exactly one agreed upon structure from the Roman world, that is the purpose-built brothel of Pompeii, which you can see on your screen now. From the previous picture, we see that it is a two-story structure. Here is a diagram showing the layout of the bottom floor of this brothel. It has 5 small rooms, each with a masonry platform that open off a wide central hallway accessed directly from doorway 18. These are 2 of the beds from 2 of the rooms in the brothel. As you can see, they are clearly masonry and the rooms are very small. I was in the doorway of each room when I took these photos. If I remember correctly, the one on the left is from room E and the one on the right is from room F. This fulfills Wallace-Hadrill's first criterion. In addition, there are 3 other similar beds, making this structure fulfill McGinn's stipulation that a brothel should be able to host more than one prostitute at a time. Now let's move on to criterion 2, sexually explicit frescoes. Frescoes such as these were found painted above the doorways of the different rooms of the brothel. In this one, on the one closest to the entryway to the brothel, a male-female couple engages in sex, with the female figure astride. Note the breastband worn by the female figure, the lampstand with a lit lamp on the left, and a pair of slippers under the bed. In this fresco, a male-female couple engages in sex, with the female figure reclining. Here, the female figure's breasts are fully exposed. In this fresco, a male-female figure engages in sex, with a recumbent male figure penetrating a female figure on all fours. There is a basin next to the couch and slippers under it. This pose finds few comparisons in other frescoes at Pompeii. In this fresco, which the picture is unfortunately not very good, a male-female couple engages in sex, with a male figure kneeling behind a female figure on all fours. She wears a breastband. As Levin Richardson points out, the specific poses in the brothel's frescoes are less graphic than many poses found in other Pompeian art. An example from the suburban baths of more graphic sex frescoes are on your screen now. In these frescoes, the female figure's body is turned toward the viewer, revealing the act of penetration as well as the genitalia of both figures. Compared to this, in the brothel's frescoes, the prostitute's position prevents views of her genitalia and the act of penetration itself. The purpose of these frescoes in the brothel remains debated. Some like to see them as advertisements for what you could purchase in the brothel, in which case the tameness of these frescoes may not have been the best selling point, while they may have just been decorative. It is also interesting to note that the furniture and decorations in the fresco from the brothel do not match the actual reality of the brothel. The nice wooden beds from the frescoes stand in stark contrast to the stone beds of the actual brothel. Finally, to fulfill the third of Wallace-Hadrill's criteria, I copy here the graffiti we have seen already that came from the brothel. They are all indeed sexual. As for McGinn's other criterion, there is no tavern or shop connected to the structure, meaning that its sole source of income was prostitution. I hope to have shown you all today that sex was a huge part of the city life of Pompeii. It was found on the streets, on the walls, and even in the baths.